Wow, this is really amazing. So we're going to talk today about building a billion-dollar business. I'm Pincus, and I'm going to kick off our questions. So ladies, did you guys set out intending to build a billion-dollar business? Was that your plan?
I don't think anybody sets out to build a billion-dollar business. I think we all are in search of changing the world in some way. For us, it was about harnessing the power of technology to make it possible to bring people together through live experiences like today. And we truly, in 2006, were just a mom and pop shop. We started Eventbrite. My co-founder, Kevin Harts, who's my husband, and our third co-founder, Renaud Visage, we're really looking for a way to democratize an industry. And the ticketing industry is one that can be categorized by three very negative factors: bad customer service, high fees, and lack of technology or innovation. So that's really what we set our mind on, and we had no idea we would scale the company to where it is today. I think it's not something that you feel like you're shocked by, because obviously you want to succeed, but that wasn't the focus in the beginning.
On our end, I think I always thought about scale when I was starting the company, just because for me, I did want to have a really large, impactful business that could, in some level, change the world. And so I think perhaps not thinking through, it has to be a billion-dollar business, and the vision was there, but it was, can I tackle a problem that's meaningful, that's actually going to make a difference to the lives of those that are involved? And so when I started working on Peak, it was really around, why is it so hard to do fun things? That's what makes us happy. Experiences are really what lend themselves to us having meaningful moments with people that we care about. So why is they so tough to organize? And when I started looking at the business in terms of, can I build something around this beyond just a feature that matters to me, I thought about three things, and that was really, the first was around the market size. For me, I think it really matters to have a really large market size. So, the activities market's about $100 billion globally. I think if that isn't the case, you can't really build a very large business. I think the second thing that really matters is having a team that's pretty complementary. And so for you guys, you and Kevin were pretty complementary. Me and my co-founder are very complementary as well. I'm more on the biz side, he's more on the tech side. And then the third thing was timing. And for me, the timing piece was all around mobile, it was completely changing the way that as consumers we look for things to do around us, but also these small businesses can run their business on the go through their phone. And so I think all of those things combined to make me feel as though there was an opportunity that could be a billion-dollar business, and that excited me in terms of knowing that that could be something that was really impactful.
So I have a follow-up question. How much of your business was founded on passion, pure passion? Because oftentimes, some of the greatest businesses are just founded on the concept that the founders were incredibly passionate about the idea.
So for me, it was really a big thing to do with my passions, because if I look at where I spend my time or my energy, or frankly my money, it's always to do with experiences. And so I found myself, whenever I went to a new place, I wanted to learn about the history, I wanted to learn about the culture, and a lot of that was about having these moments, whether that's paragliding in Rio or going horse riding in Mongolia. Those were really formative, meaningful experiences for me. And when I thought about kind of what I wanted to do, I wanted to be in a situation where I could help other people have those moments, whether that's really close to home and going surfing in California, all the way through to something that was a bit more kind of far away and really pushed your boundaries. So I think for me, passion was a big piece of it, and I couldn't have started the business if I didn't have a deep-seated passion for the space.
We had a different experience, which was, we were really interested in how we could change, again, this industry that needed to be changed. And we weren't necessarily super passionate about live experiences. And one of the things I learned along the way was it's really important to tap into a very strong vision and a direction. And because we sort of were building as we went, and we didn't have this huge grand vision in the beginning, it was really important about 3 or 4 years in, as we started to build the team, to provide that vision and be bold enough to put it down on paper. And it sounds silly, but it took a lot of guts to do that, because I felt like our vision would become stagnant or irrelevant over time if we told the company. But what I found is that as you're building a team, you need that direction, you need that vision, because you need to all move in the same direction. So our vision is to bring the world together through live experiences, which sounds quite corny, but our mission is to build the first global marketplace for live experiences. And that was really a turning point for us once we were able to tap into that vision and really ignite the passion within the company from that. Right back at you, though, because I know that you have a ton of passion for what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, One Kings Lane was started off as a passion project, right? It wasn't, oh, let's go build a $10 million company. Let's start this business because we felt so deeply that people wanted access to the product. So that's where it started from. But I think we're going to now turn to Ruzwana because you're going to ask us questions.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think the big questions that I have for you guys is, what would you kind of tell yourself before you started the company? Now that you've learned all these, through all these challenges and things that have happened, what are the things you wish you knew before you started?
I think I wish I would have known that evolution is okay. I think pivot is such a somewhat negative word in our world, and I've learned through the last 9 years that evolution is necessary, that you have to constantly evolve your business. And for us, we've had 3 major phases of evolution. So we started out to build tools for anybody to create a great event and to become an event organizer. And then as we started to build that to scale, we actually developed a platform. And with the advent of social media and the way in which people started to share events and started to drive consumer engagement, we got to this sort of critical mass of consumer engagement where we actually started to see people coming back to Eventbrite to discover live experiences. And that really takes us into present day, which is that we have this huge opportunity to actually build a marketplace. We had 1.1 million events last year actively ticketed on Eventbrite, and that presents in itself from an inventory perspective just a really key advantage. And then, if we can successfully engage consumers to find those events, I think we have something really special. But when we started out, I think I was very afraid of anything that looked like a pivot because I thought that that was negative. And what I wish I would have told myself is that evolution's necessary to succeed.
Gotcha. I think because we were sort of in such a mad dash to get the business started, we were so incredibly focused on sort of the front end that we sort of attacked the back end of the business, like once we had launched. So really trying to figure out all the shipping components and all the back end pieces. And obviously, when you're launching thousands of new SKUs every day, operations is incredibly important to building a clean and streamlined business.
And then, what do you think are the biggest mistakes you've made along the route?
That's a tough one because and I'm not trying to get around your question, but I think mistakes can be taken in sort of several different ways, and I've always thought of them as lessons. And so I think the biggest lesson that we learned early on as co-founders is to not be fearful. I think we've not done things because we were fearful, maybe of failing or maybe of making our customers angry. I remember when we started, we had a sort of classic freemium model where we had a basic service that was free. There were no ticket fees, even for paid events, and then a premium service that was paid. And the idea was that features would be in the premium service that weren't in the basic service, except we wanted to give everybody everything. So as a user, when you came to Eventbrite, you had no idea what the difference was between the basic and premium service. And it took us a couple of years to realize that we needed to just make Eventbrite worth the premium service it was. And when we ripped that Band-Aid off, our conversion skyrocketed. We had very little customer churn, and that was sort of the biggest lesson to not be fearful and to know your worth.
I think there's tons and tons of lessons to be learned and tons of mistakes to be made. So I think if I were just to hit on one sort of big example of a mistake was we sort of separated out our merchandising teams. And so they were sort of in various segments, like new products versus vintage product. And I'm sort of getting into the weeds. But the point is, it can be a lot more impactful if you put sort of the team together, and that was like our biggest sort of mistake was we just sort of separated out the business and organized ourselves in a certain way because it made sense to us and how we sort of thought about producing what we do every day, because we're sort of producing a Broadway show every single day with over 2,000 new products, or sometimes close to 2,500. But so that to us was one of our biggest mistakes.
I'd say for peak, one of our biggest mistakes was that we were so keen to get started, we didn't really think through the people we needed to get involved at the start. And so, you know, in the early stages, you're like, you want to work for me? Amazing, come on board. And you're not very good at filtering and understanding what you care about in terms of culture or values that people need to have. And so I think one of the biggest mistakes we made was just at the start not getting quite the right fit. And the thing is that when you don't have the right people in the business at the start, you really pay for it. And you're going to have to, at some point, it's awkward to have to start letting go of people when it's not working out. And I think that was, you know, the lesson for us was be really careful about bringing people in and make sure that as you do, you're comfortable with the idea that you might have to let people go reasonably quickly if it doesn't fit. And I think that's one of the big lessons you have in general for startups, but it was something that was really acute for us. In which case, you know, to turn this around, you know, how you think about taking advice. How do you think about taking advice from your investors or, you know, from customers, or frankly, from the person sitting next to you at the dinner table? Because it's probably the case that for all of us, we have businesses that people might know about or be able to engage with, so everyone has an opinion. How do you deal with that?
So one of the great things I've learned from my co-founder, Kevin, is to seek all advice and to get as much advice in, data input, and it's really up to you to filter it. And I think oftentimes entrepreneurs might find themselves in situations where they're surrounded by people who just tell them that they're amazing. Their investors, their mom, their partner. And I think it's really important that you find the truth through many different points of advice and feedback. And so we've just really built this village of people from very different walks of life and very different points of view. And we get a ton of data all the time that we're constantly filtering through to kind of make the best decision. But I can definitely say starting out, I did not want to hear that feedback. I'm not the type of person to ask questions or to seek advice. And it's something that I've really learned to do over the last few years and have built that sort of as a muscle. And that's been very, very key to getting to where we want to go.
So we're a customer-focused business, so every single day we all want to hear from our shoppers. It's all about what does she need, what are her thoughts, what's happening, what's working for her, what's not working for her, and that's what drives our business. And also similar to you, Julia, like we love getting advice, and we're always open ears, and Susan and myself are meeting with as many people as we can just to seek advice and to learn.
Mm-hmm. So. And how do you filter some advice that might go against some of the things that you're thinking about? You know, how do you manage the balance between being open to influence and then also making sure that you stick to your guns on the areas that you think are really important?
I think it's over time you have to build the ability to have a little bit of wisdom and perspective and ownership of your business, because I think you could be sent in many different directions. What I try to do is think about what's motivating the person that's giving me that advice, where are they coming from, and then trying to filter it through. But I think also it's just stopping every now and again and really being true to seeking that advice. I love what you said about customer feedback, because that is the ultimate truth. You may feel like you're building the best product and that you're just killing it, you know, on the service side. And if you look through any sort of day of comments or customer support calls, you'll really get grounded quite quickly.
It's so true, because oftentimes someone could say, oh, for example, Ruzwana, you should go into the food category. Only you and your team are closest to your business, and so you have enough data to decide whether or not that's the right answer for you guys. And so to Julia's point, that's incredibly important, is to sort of like, it's important to be open to feedback, but at the end of the day, you need to really own your own decision making.
I want to go back to culture, because Ruzwana touched on hiring and team, but I'd love to hear from you sort of how you've thought of building the team at One Kings Lane, and you know, what have been the highlights and the lowlights, and what have you learned in that process? Yeah,
so for us, our culture is really around, again, our shopper. Our customer is our number one priority. How can we serve her? How can we think about her? And how can we make sure that everything that she's doing with us exceeds her expectations? And so we're always looking for people who can really sort of understand that mentality.
That's great. So I'll jump in a little bit on
Sure.
culture, because it's been sort of my key focus. So at Eventbrite, my function is quite literally to focus on the people of Eventbrite. We have 500 employees now in 8 offices around the world, and I think that wasn't my intention to be focused on people, but when we started to scale the company from 30 people to 100 people in less than a year, it really became clear that this would be the breaking point if there was going to be one. And I think that so many times we forget that it really is about the people. And I think maybe the reason why we forget it is it's actually the hardest part of building a company. So as startup entrepreneurs, we tend to go put out sort of the quickest fire first, or pick off the lowest hanging fruit. And the people stuff is hard. It's just complicated and messy and hard. And one of the things that I've realized over the years is that there is a consistent theme in our hiring, which is beyond skill set and impact in education or prior career. We also look for what we call the make it happen spirit, which is really kind of cheesy, but that's actually grit. And so we look for people who, in moments of stress, will reach extra far to either help someone, make a difference, or fix something. And that's, I think, been our common theme in our hiring, and that has actually sort of been pervasive in the company's growth over the years.
Yep, on our end, I think having faltered a little bit at the start, we really started thinking about culture and actually, to some extent, codifying it. And I think one thing that's been really helpful for us as a team is actually getting everybody together and getting everybody to tell us what they think the most important cultural values are. And we did this exercise, and we try and do it reasonably regularly. And one of the incredible things for me has been seeing that people coalesce around the same themes, and those are around some of the stuff around grit and persistence, someone who's going to push through even when it's hard. I think another thing that's interesting and perhaps somewhat unexpected is most of the team has this kind of, I would say every person in the team has incredible curiosity, and wanting to learn is one of the primary things that drives them in life, let alone in their job. And I think that's been a really important characteristic to identify and understand. And so kind of having these regular syncs where we think about the things that we care about, but involving the whole team in that process, and them giving us feedback about the values that they care about, allows everyone to be on the same page as we're bringing new people in. And I think, to your point about evolution, I think that's something that you've got to be willing to allow to have change as well. As you grow as a team, there may be other values that you care about. And in the early days, it might be that somebody has this very specific skill set, but as you get bigger, you might be able to say, look, we can actually train for the skill set. What we care is about those kind of intrinsic skills around grit and persistence. And so I think that is something that you've got to be open to too. But culture has been a really defining characteristic in terms of us being able to get to where we want to be over the long term.
So we talked about strategy, culture, hiring, mistakes. We haven't talked about fundraising. So I can feel you. So I'd love to. I don't think I've ever talked about this, and we were just chatting backstage. I'd love to hear from a fundraising perspective the sort of objections you've heard throughout the year from VCs, because that's always fun.
Oh, yes. Okay, so when we started our business, first of all, we bootstrapped. Susan and I bootstrapped the business, and we raised money once we were cash flow positive, and once we had, I think it was about 8 months of revenue, maybe 9 months. So one of the sort of persistent objections was, we just don't think people are going to keep shopping for their home, unlike apparel, unlike fashion, whereby someone is oftentimes updating their wardrobe, buying a new dress, buying a new pair of shoes. We just don't see that same sort of quality in your business. And so that was really the chief sort of objection to the business.
We went out in 2008 to raise our first round of institutional funding. It was wonderful timing. And we had bootstrapped the company as well for a couple of years. And that was really just like an academic decision to see what we could do with very lean resources. And when we were ready to go raise, we met with everybody, and we failed. I mean, we were totally unsuccessful in getting a term sheet. And I think that one of the major objections during that time was customer acquisition, and how would we acquire new organizers, how would it scale? And I think once you're asked something over and over and over again, you start to doubt your own, conviction, or at least I did. And it sort of made me angry. And I think we, in a good way, put that energy to good use. And we had always sort of imagined that we would have this sort of virtuous cycle in customer acquisition where attendees would become organizers. And I think back often to those conversations because that's exactly what happened. We sort of manifested that virtuous cycle. But we also learned something during that process, which is to share your plan. So we left our 2009 plan with everybody who we'd met with, and at the end of 2009, we went back out to the same people, and the conversation had totally changed. Well, first and foremost, we did what we said we would do, and that was almost a novel idea to the community, to the VC community, and that just changed the dynamic of the conversation. And so I thought, it's really important to show that you have traction and to not just try to sell a dream. And doing what you said you were going to do is actually, something kind of novel and amazing. And so we just had a totally different experience just about 11 months later, and we raised our first round from Sequoia Capital.
So I think one of the big things that we heard was, hey, you don't have experience in the travel or activities space. And so candidly, neither me nor my co-founder had. And it was one of the things that actually I think was really healthy, because it meant that we could come in without any kind of biases or expectations around how things had to be done. But it was something we definitely had to fight for. And when I first was beginning to work on the company, I had people I was meeting with say, you know what, I think you should go back and work at a big company that does kind of, travel or something associated with activities before you even start the business. And that was a little disheartening, because you kind of have this idea you're really passionate about, and people are telling you to go back and do something that isn't meaningful. So I kind of ignored that advice, hence I'm here. But the second thing that we kind of heard was, look, the activities business is really large, but there aren't any big players in the space. So there's no kayak for activities. There's no big brand that has been there. There's not a huge exit. And so that was also something that we faced. And I think when you're starting to go into uncharted territory, that's really hard, because obviously the fact that no one's built it before means that there's a huge opportunity, but you're not going to ever get into that if you're always going to rely on someone else having done it before. So I think that was challenging. And I think the way that we were looking at that was trying to take corollaries from other businesses. So we were saying, look, OpenTable has done this for the restaurant industry. MindBody has done this for kind of Pilates and yoga. So we were able to take examples from other spaces and show that we had an opportunity that was just as large as theirs. So that's how we tackled it. But it was they were tough things to be able to overcome.
We should have chatted, because when we started our business, for example, many of our vendors and partners had no internet experience. They were not selling their products on the web. And so we were sort of their first foray onto the web.
Yep, we have the same problem. Less than 20% of activities operators have any online presence to do bookings. So that's what we're tackling. So now we can talk behind stage.
We're getting the hook. So
we can talk about it, and it's a special opportunity, because you can help really educate and really help sort of change the industry together. So
completely.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks so much.
Awesome.